China warns Taiwan's new president, Tsai Ing-wen, against seeking independence.
Regardless of what international political changes take place within Taiwan, China's position of upholding the One China principle, opposing Taiwanese independence, opposing two Chinas, and One China, One Taiwan will not change.
The Taiwan Affairs Office in Beijing also said it will be impossible to have peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait if Taipei attempts to move away from the mainland. This came as Taiwan's new president called for, quote, positive dialogue with Beijing. Speaking in her inauguration speech, Taiwan's new president said such talks will serve the interests of both sides. The two sides have been locked in a territorial dispute for a long time. China and Taiwan are separated by the Taiwan Strait in the Western Pacific Ocean. They split in 1949 following a civil war. But Beijing still regards the island as part of its territory. Taiwan refuses to accept China's position. Let's go to Nara, Japan, and talk to Ryan Dawson, political commentator there. Thanks for joining us, sir. Mr. Dawson, the new Taiwanese president has sent a conciliatory message to China. How would you expect the relations between China and Taiwan to develop under this new president?
First, congratulations to Taiwan. That's their first female president. I'm glad the two are trying to reconcile and to make better relations with one another. Both have held rather ridiculous positions with the ROC claiming all of China and the People's Republic of China also trying to claim Taiwan. Of course, there's a lot of debate about the sovereignty between the two states. The reality is, though, that Taiwan is and has its own government. They collect their own taxes that do not go to China. They have their own currency, their own passports. They are an independent nation, whether people want to recognize them as such or not. And the same for China. Neither can hold claim over the other. And so I hope they'll to bury the hatchet and work on trade relations and substantial things that can matter rather than titles and things on paper like that.
Indeed, but in her inaugural speech, Tsai Ing-wen didn't make any reference to the 1992 agreement between China and Taiwan, which holds that there is one China. What should we make of this?
Well, both of them agreed there is one China. They just think it's theirs. The ROC thinks all of China, like China and Taiwan, the island, belong to them, and the People's Republic of China think that Taiwan is part of the mainland China. So they both agree on one China. They just disagree on whose one China that is. It's kind of ridiculous to me. I mean, they're looking at debating whether or not outside states recognize Taiwan as independent or part of the ROC, but that stuff's all political. The reality is they are independent based on their independence. They're paying taxes to their own government, writing their own laws, have their own economic system. That makes them a country in my mind. The reason that they're not recognized is just because of political pressure from China. It's the same way Native Indians are, some of them are not federally recognized in the United States. It's just ridiculous. They're definitely Native American. Why do you need external validation to say that you exist? I mean, but that's how it is. That's what I'd like for both states, and they are two states, to get away from that bickering of who controls who, when it's very clear they have separate governments, and that's not going to change. And to work with each other, get over these island disputes and things as well, and just trade and have good relations. That's what both states should be concentrating on. Having them divided, who does that benefit?
Indeed.
China's main enemies, which would be in the U.S.
All right. Ryan Dawson, political commentator from Nara, Japan. Thanks for your time there, sir.
Taiwan has a constitution, an army, and an elected government. Yet the United Nations doesn't formally recognize it. The reason? China considers the island one of its provinces, the government as illegitimate, and talk of independence deeply hostile. A new president in Taipei from the independent-leaning Democratic Progressive Party is testing China's tolerance, as is a new president in Washington. Here's the situation. Taiwan's first female president, Tsai Ing-wen, provoked an angry response from China by speaking to Donald Trump by telephone after he was elected. In deference to the Beijing government, no US leader has talked directly to a Taiwan president for almost 4 decades. Tsai says she wants peaceful ties with China while resisting pressure to acknowledge one China principle. 两岸之间应该要尽快坐下来谈。 That principle has underpinned relations with China in the past. It's the understanding that both sides belong to one China, even if they have different ideas about what that means. Trump says his support for a one China policy hinges on cutting a better trade deal with China, prompting a complaint from the Chinese government.
I don't know why we have to be bound by a one China policy unless we make a deal with China.
Tsai is promising to follow public opinion on China. Polls show strong support for maintaining the status quo of coexistence and little immediate interest in independence. Here's the argument. Taiwan's 23.5 million people have built their economy into a technology and manufacturing powerhouse. Average income 3 times that of China's, and much of Apple's iPhone made there. Voters turned to Tsai to keep the peace while building international ties, with a view to a future less dependent on the mainland. While many China watchers say there's too much at stake for military confrontation, Trump's election has added a degree of uncertainty to the old assumptions. An increasingly assertive China aims more than 1,200 missiles at Taiwan, and no peace treaty has been signed in the 7 decades since the government split. For the US, some analysts say supporting the one China policy has allowed it to sell weapons to Taiwan, and that's helped deter China from attempting.
The Taiwan Independence Forces have challenged our nation's solidarity in cultural, education, and other fields of society with this so-called de-Sinicization campaign. Separatists intend to cut off the historical ties between mainlanders and Taiwanese by eroding national consciousness and traditional Chinese culture. We have to realize the biggest threat to the peace and stability of both sides of the Taiwan Straits is the Taiwan Independence Forces and their activities to split China. Compatriots need to be alert of such actions and resist their influence firmly.
A majority of Taiwanese choose to put their trust in the mainland, and for a very simple reason. The mainland is developing. President Xi made it clear in his work report to the 19th CPC National Congress that the mainland will share development opportunities with everyone. So, as a party, we have the responsibility to lead these Taiwanese to seize these opportunities and oppose the Taiwan Independence Forces.
Our nation's first atomic bomb is a success.
It is 53 years since China joined the nuclear club.
Long live the Chinese Communist Party. Long live Chairman Mao.
When it detonated its first atomic bomb, China was poor and recovering from civil war and Japan's military occupation. Chairman Mao said that to prevent that happening again, he needed the ultimate deterrent. It was now the Cold War, and China's then ideological ally, the Soviet Union, was happy to help. There are no official figures regarding China's nuclear arsenal. That's because it's one of the biggest state secrets of all. But a recent US government report estimated that China currently has around 300 nuclear warheads and around 100 intercontinental ballistic missiles to deliver those warheads. As recently as May this year, Chinese leaders pledged they would only use nuclear weapons if China was attacked first. What's less clear, say experts, is how China would respond to a conventional weapons strike.
China will only use nuclear weapons to retaliate against a nuclear strike. But we have to admit there are internal debates. Some people want to see China to change its nuclear policy and treat a conventional strike on its nuclear weapons as a nuclear strike on China.
4 of China's neighbors are nuclear armed: Russia, Pakistan, India, and North Korea. Recent evidence suggests that China may have unintentionally aided the North's nuclear missile program when it sold these trucks, supposedly destined for the timber industry. Analysts say those same trucks, seen here, were later modified to carry and possibly launch the long-range missiles North Korea's been testing.
China in recent years also sold some heavy truck chassis to North Korea, and in those cases North Korea provided end-use certificate to China, pledging that these heavy trucks would only be used for logging.
Unlike North Korea, China doesn't boast about being a nuclear power. But a recent military parade in Beijing was a potent reminder of its growing military strength, a strength underpinned by a nuclear arsenal that experts say is now the world's fourth largest. Adrian Brown, Al Jazeera, Beijing.